High in the rugged spine of the mountains, where pine trees stood like silent witnesses and the wind carried old memories through narrow passes, Elias Crow lived alone. His cabin was wedged between stone and forest, far from any trail marked on a map. Few knew he existed, and fewer still would have cared. That was how Elias wanted it. Solitude was not loneliness to him, it was armor. Years earlier, Elias had been a mountain scout, guiding wagons and traders through dangerous territory. He knew the land the way a man knows his own scars. But that life ended in blood and fire. A dispute between settlers and natives had turned violent, and Elias, caught between both sides, lost everything: his family, his purpose, and his belief that people could choose mercy over fear. After burying the dead with his own hands, he walked away from civilization and never looked back. Now his days followed a quiet rhythm. He woke before sunrise, stoked the fire, and stepped outside to read the mountain's mood. Some mornings the peaks were gentle, brushed with pink light. Others, they loomed dark and unforgiving. Elias hunted deer and trapped small game, dried meat on wooden racks, and patched his cabin with the patience of a man who had nowhere else to be. He spoke to no one, and the silence never argued back. Yet the past never stayed buried. Some nights, the wind carried echoes of shouting, gunfire. As thunder growled in the distance, Elias froze. There was movement near the trading post. Not the kind made by animals or shifting branches, but something unsteady, desperate. He narrowed his eyes, heart tightening. No one came this far without reason, and reasons were rarely good. Elias told himself to ignore it. Trouble was not his concern anymore. He had paid enough for other people's sins. But as lightning split the sky, he saw a pale shape against the dark wood of the old building, something hanging where nothing should hang. The image burned into his mind, stirring a part of him he believed long dead. He climbed down slowly, each step heavier than the last. The rifle came off its hook without thought. The storm broke as Elias started down the narrow trail toward the trading post, rain soaking his coat, thunder masking his footsteps. With every stride, the walls he had built around himself cracked. Elias Crow had chosen isolation to survive. But as he moved through the storm toward the unknown, fate was already pulling him back into the world of pain, injustice, and human suffering he had tried so hard to leave behind. Rain lashed Elias's face as he reached the abandoned trading post, its timbers creaking like a dying thing in the storm. The building leaned under years of neglect, its roof half-rotted, its doors hanging crooked on rusted hinges. Lightning flashed, and for an instant the world turned white, revealing the truth of what Elias had seen from afar. A woman was tied to the slanted roof, her wrists bound above her head with coarse rope. Her body sagged under its own weight, boots barely touching the warped shingles. Wet blonde hair clung to her face and neck, hiding most of her feet. "I won't leave you here," he said firmly. He lifted her again, ignoring the pain in his arms and the weight of responsibility settling on his chest. The storm followed him as he made the climb back toward his cabin, rain soaking them both. The woman clutched his shirt weakly, as if afraid the world would drop her again if she let go. Inside the cabin, Elias laid her near the fire and stripped away her wet outer clothes with care, turning his eyes aside whenever he could. He cleaned her wounds with water and a scrap of cloth, his hands steady despite the anger burning beneath his calm. Each blistered letter on her back felt like an accusation against humanity itself. As warmth returned to her body, her breathing steadied. She finally whispered a single word, barely audible. "Clara." Elias nodded, committing the name to memory. He fed the fire and sat nearby, rifle within reach, listening to the storm rage outside. He told himself he was only helping her survive the night, that once she healed, she would leave, and his life would return to silence. But as Clara slept under his roof, Elias Crow knew the mountains had already broken their silence for a reason. Clara did not wake until late the next morning. The storm had passed, leaving the mountains washed clean and painfully bright. Sunlight slipped through the small cabin window, catching on the kettle Elias had set to boil. He had barely slept, spending the night on a hard chair with his rifle across his knees, listening for footsteps that never came. When Clara stirred, she flinched at the unfamiliar ceiling. Her breath quickened, and her hands clenched at the blanket. Elias rose slowly, careful not to startle her. "You're safe," he said. "No one followed us." She studied him for a long moment, as if weighing whether to trust his words. Finally, her shoulders relaxed, just a little. "I thought I was dead," she whispered. Elias poured warm water into a tin cup and helped her drink. Color returned faintly to her face. As strength crept back, so did memory, and with it, pain. She turned her head away when he asked about the mark on her back. They wanted everyone to see it, she said quietly. So no one would help me. Over the next 2 days, Clara spoke in pieces, her story unraveling slowly like a wound being unwrapped. She had been traveling west with a missionary wagon when sickness swept through their camp. An Apache family had found her collapsed near the river and nursed her back to health. She stayed with them through the winter, teaching their children to read, sharing food, learning their language. There had been kindness, more than she had known among her own people. When she returned to the settlement in spring, the rumors came first. Then the accusations. To them, her survival meant betrayal. Mercy, in their eyes, was treason. They said I chose them, Clara murmured, tears tracing paths through the grime on her cheeks. As if compassion belonged to one side. Elias listened without interruption, his face carved from stone. Her words echoed his own past, the lies that turned neighbors into enemies, the way fear demanded someone to blame. He knew then that the brand was not just a punishment, it was a message meant to poison others against her. That night, Elias spotted riders far below the ridge. Searchers. He doused the cabin lights and moved Clara to the back room, pressing a finger to his lips. Fear flickered across her face, but she nodded, gripping the edge of the bed. They won't take you, he said simply. The riders passed, but the danger did not. Elias began taking longer routes when gathering supplies, erasing tracks, setting quiet traps. Protection came naturally to him, as if he had never stopped being a scout. Clara noticed. You've done this before, she said one evening. Yes, he replied. And I failed. She reached out then, her fingers brushing his scarred hand. You didn't fail me. In the days that followed, trust took root. Clara helped where she could, mending clothes, sweeping the cabin, humming softly while the kettle boiled. Elias found himself listening, really listening, for the first time in years. Her presence filled the silence without breaking it. Yet the brand on her back remained, dark and angry, a reminder that the world beyond the mountains still wanted her erased. Elias understood now that saving her once was not enough. To keep her alive, he would have to face the very world he had abandoned. The mountains seemed to sense what was coming. The air grew tight, the birds vanished, and even the wind held its breath. Elias noticed the signs before he ever saw the men, tracks cut too deep for hunters, broken brush along the lower ridge, the distant clink of metal carried uphill. They're coming, he said quietly. Clara stiffened but did not panic. In the days since her rescue, fear had hardened into resolve. She rose from the table, shoulders straight despite the pain that still lingered beneath her dress. I won't run anymore, she said. Elias studied her, then nodded. Then we stand. He prepared the cabin with practiced calm, checking sight lines, loading his rifle, positioning himself where the mountain favored him. This land was his ally. Every rock, every shadow, every narrow approach had been learned over years of survival. Yet when the riders finally emerged from the trees, there were more than he had hoped for. 5 men dismounted at the edge of the clearing. Their faces were set, their rifles visible, their purpose unmistakable. One stepped forward, his voice sharp as a blade. We know you're hiding her, the man called. Hand her over, and this ends clean. Elias stepped onto the porch, rifle resting but ready. There's nothing clean about what you did to her. Murmurs rippled through the group. They had expected a hermit, not resistance. Clara moved beside Elias then, the door creaking open behind her. Gasps followed as she turned, revealing the burned words on her back. For a moment, the men looked satisfied, until she spoke. You branded me with a lie, she said, her voice steady. I helped starving children. I chose mercy. If that makes me guilty, then so be it, but I won't be silent. Before the men could answer, a sound rose from the tree line. Horses. More than a few. Elias's grip tightened, uncertain whether the moment would tip toward bloodshed. Instead, Apache riders emerged, calm and watchful. An elder dismounted, meeting the posse's gaze without fear. He spoke of the winter Clara had shared with them, of her kindness, of how she had saved lives when others turned away. The truth landed heavier than any bullet. Shame crept into the settlers' faces. One man lowered his rifle. Another spat into the dirt and turned away. The leader hesitated, then backed down, the authority he'd relied on stripped bare. They left without another word. As silence returned, Clara exhaled shakily. Elias realized his hands were trembling, not from fear, but from the weight lifting off his chest. For the first time in years, he had not chosen isolation. Spring arrived quietly in the high mountains, as if careful not to disturb what had been healed. Snow retreated from the slopes, wildflowers pushed through thawed earth, and sunlight lingered longer each evening. With it came a sense of beginning, something Elias had not allowed himself to feel in years. Clara's strength returned day by day. The burns on her back closed slowly, leaving scars that no longer throbbed with pain. Elias watched her one morning as she stood outside the cabin, letting the sun warm her skin. She did not try to hide the mark anymore. It was no longer a sentence, it was proof that she had survived. Together, they turned their attention to the abandoned trading post down the ridge. What had once been a place of cruelty and silence became a project of rebuilding. Elias repaired the beams and roof, while Clara cleaned the interior and opened the shuttered windows. Word spread quietly among travelers and mountain folk: the post was open again, not for judgment, but for shelter. Strangers began to pass through. Some stayed a night, some only long enough to share a meal and a story. Elias found himself listening more than watching, speaking more than he had in years. The mountains no longer felt like walls, they felt like home. One evening, as the sky blushed with sunset, Clara stood beside Elias on the porch of the restored post. "You didn't just save my life," she said softly. "You gave me a place to belong." Elias looked at her, the woman who had been brought into his life by storm and cruelty, and realized she had returned something he thought lost forever: his belief in people. "You did the